Hey guys, tonight we wander into one of the stranger corners of history, where innocence and politics meet, and childhood is a fleeting whisper lost beneath silk veils and heavy gold embroidery. Picture yourself inside a candlelit hall, the walls ancient and dripping with shadows. The scent of beeswax candles mixed with the faint aroma of lavender and rosewater wraps around you, pulling you deeper into the hush. You can almost hear the whispering, feel the heavy stairs, the flutter of silk dresses, and in the very center of it all, barely visible beneath cascades of lace and gold-threaded embroidery, sits the tiniest bride Europe ever knew. And look, let's get real. You probably wouldn't survive this ordeal. Most people wouldn't. Childhood in medieval times was tough enough without being dragged into marriage contracts before you could even spell your own name. So before we go any further, if this quiet space makes you feel even a little less alone, you can like the video and subscribe, but only if it feels right to your heart. And hey, I'd love to know where you're listening from. Were you lying awake in a quiet room at 2 a.m? Or maybe starting your day in a rainy city, eyes still heavy? Drop your time and place in the comments. Let's remind each other we're not alone out here. Now dim the lights, let your shoulders relax, and let's begin tonight's slow, strange journey, together, here on Timeless Sleep. Silk rustles as you move carefully through the crowd. It's thick tonight, the guests packed shoulder to shoulder, a blur of noble faces both familiar and strange. You glance toward the raised dais at the far end, illuminated by the gentle flicker of hundreds of candles, their flames dancing like nervous fairies. There, amidst the heavy grandeur, sits the girl. 4 years old, eyes wide, cheeks flushed in confusion. She's wrapped in silks heavy enough to make an adult sweat, let alone a child who barely weighs more than a large goose. Her veil is embroidered with golden threads depicting royal sigils and ancestral crests, symbols she can't yet read, names she cannot pronounce. The crown atop her tiny head tilts precariously, and you briefly consider rushing forward to catch it, if it falls, but the child bride remains motionless. Her small body swallowed by robes designed more to impress foreign dignitaries than to fit her frail frame. You wonder what she's thinking, or if she's even fully awake. Perhaps this is a dream to her, a strange, drawn-out dream she'll barely recall in the morning, except for a vague sense of discomfort and maybe an unusual nightmare or two. But no, her wide eyes tell you otherwise. She's painfully aware, despite not fully understanding what this ceremony means, of the gravity in every whispered syllable, every careful nod from the adults who crowd around her like expectant vultures. Across the hall, musicians strike up a soft melody, harpstrings trembling beneath hesitant fingers, the lute humming gently in accompaniment. A few coughs punctuate the hushed murmurs, and you overhear whispers about trade routes, alliances, and something to do with sheep pastures or spices, adults discussing adult things, while in their midst, a toddler bride stares blankly into the candlelight, counting flames to stay awake. The groom, you realize, is nowhere to be seen. Of course, tradition often dictates he remain apart until the moment vows are exchanged, because heaven forbid the awkwardness of meeting your 4-year-old bride before you absolutely have to. The sarcasm makes you smile grimly. History is full of these little uncomfortable details, but tonight seems particularly stark. Your eyes wander back to the girl. Her name is whispered occasionally around you, often accompanied by sighs of admiration or envy, which feels utterly absurd. After all, who envies a child plucked from a nursery, stuffed into royal gowns, and paraded before hundreds of nobles as if she were merely an expensive porcelain doll? Behind her, the child bride's mother stands rigidly, lips pursed so tightly they look painted on. Her gaze is heavy with silent apologies. Her daughter cannot yet understand, and you see the raw ache of motherhood battling with duty in her expression. The father is nowhere near as conflicted. He laughs heartily with visiting dignitaries, his eyes bright, chest puffed with pride as if he'd arranged nothing more controversial than a profitable horse trade. You quietly step closer, slipping past towering bodies perfumed with herbs and rare oils. Finally, near enough to the dais to hear the small rustling of the bride's gown as she shifts nervously. You study her delicate features, her lips quiver slightly, but she holds herself still, as she's clearly been taught to fidget would disappoint mother, to cry would anger father. A single mistake could disgrace a kingdom. No pressure, kiddo. From the corner of your eye, you catch sight of a maid discreetly stepping forward to adjust the heavy golden circlet that threatens to slide down the girl's forehead. The child winces slightly as it presses against her temples, the metal cool and unyielding. It's symbolic, of course. This golden band. Heavy as the head that wears the crown. But surely whoever coined that phrase didn't envision a toddler as its wearer. The archbishop shuffles forward now, his robes whispering ancient prayers across the floor. He's elderly and moves slowly, each step deliberate as he takes his place on the dais. You hold your breath, half expecting him to protest, to say something reasonable like, "Hey, perhaps we should wait until she's at least lost her first baby tooth." But instead, he raises his voice in solemn invocation, blessing this unholy arrangement with words that hang heavily in the perfumed air. The hall falls silent. Even the whispers pause in reverence or perhaps embarrassment, as the archbishop drones through prayers far older than anyone here. The child blinks slowly, eyelids drooping slightly now. Maybe the droning voice has finally lulled her towards sleep. You wouldn't blame her. Frankly, you're tempted yourself, as the archbishop seems determined to recite every prayer he's ever learned. Finally, he concludes, and the guests stir. Relief palpable, but the ceremony is far from over. The vows will follow shortly, binding this innocent forever to a fate dictated by family ambition rather than love or even logic. The groom finally emerges, himself barely older than the bride, though at least he can dress himself and presumably manage to eat without assistance. He approaches hesitantly, eyes downcast. Someone whispers to him urgently, nudging him forward. You notice a faint tremble in his hands as he takes his place beside his infant bride. They exchange glances, two children caught in a ritual devised long before their birth, trapped in a web of duty, power, and adult desires. You watch closely now, your heart aching gently for these two pawns in history's grand chessboard. The boy tries valiantly to stand taller, sensing his role is crucial. The girl remains frozen, overwhelmed by everything except the instinct to obey, to remain silent, to wait for it all to be over. And you can't help but wonder, how many similar ceremonies has history hidden away? How many children have stood trembling beneath crowns too heavy, veils too thick, vows too permanent? There's no comfort in realizing this is just another drop in a vast ocean of historical tragedies. As the vows are recited, words too complex for either child to grasp, you step back, retreating gently toward the shadowy edges of the hall. The ceremony continues, murmurs resume, smiles and congratulations spread amongst the guests. But from where you stand, everything seems surreal and unbearably sad, a testament to humanity's strange ability to normalize even the most bizarre customs. You lean against a cool stone pillar, watching as the crowd applauds politely. The girl bride glances around nervously, searching for some comfort, some familiar face. But everyone around her is engrossed in celebration of what exactly you're unsure. The night stretches on, candles melting lower, shadows deepening. Gradually, the crowd thins. You remain, silently observing as the tiny bride is led away by attendants, her small steps slow and heavy beneath robes designed more for display than comfort. You hear a whisper, something about bedtime, about dreams, about how tomorrow everything will seem brighter. But as you watch her disappear down the dark corridor, tiny frame swallowed by shadows, you realize with quiet sadness that for history's youngest bride, innocence ended here tonight in this candlelit hall, filled with murmured vows and unspoken regrets. As you linger in the hall, candlelight flickering weakly around you, you find your thoughts drifting to simpler, sweeter moments. Days when this little bride's greatest concern would have been keeping her doll's dress clean or deciding which game she'd like to play next. How quickly life can pivot, you muse, trading innocence for intrigue and playthings for politics, faster than the wax melts from a burning candle. And just like that, in what feels like the blink of an eye, the child's world transforms entirely. One day she sits cross-legged on plush velvet carpets, humming softly as she combs the long hair of a porcelain doll. And the next, she's thrust into a rigid routine of etiquette lessons, political studies, and endless fittings for gowns too heavy to play in, let alone wear comfortably. Imagine it clearly. the shift as sudden and harsh as jumping from warm blankets into a cold winter morning. You can almost hear her faint protests, her quiet confusion muffled behind closed doors as attendants gently guide her away from toys toward thick, dusty tomes and overly complicated lessons about lineages, alliances, and political intrigue. She's 4 years old, just barely old enough to know how to hold a quill, let alone understand the weight of her signature upon royal documents. Now picture her chambers, the same rooms where once laughter echoed freely and the floor was littered with brightly coloured toys. Today these chambers take on a sterner atmosphere. Stacks of books appear, the covers richly embossed with golden lettering she can't yet decipher. Maps spread across tables far taller than her tiny frame become the centerpieces of her daily routine, marked with lines indicating territories she doesn't even know exist. You pause to wonder whether, in those quiet moments alone, she might whisper a faint goodbye to the dolls and games, a tiny farewell as she transitions from carefree child to miniature queen in training. Her attendants, women with gentle voices but tired eyes, patiently explain dynasties and diplomatic relationships, concepts that sail far above her curly-haired head. They gesture toward distant lands on the maps, describing allies and enemies, kingdoms she must remember to smile at or approach with cautious distance. And all the while she listens obediently, eyes wide but vacant, nodding occasionally with polite but bewildered agreement. She cannot grasp the nuances of these lessons, but understands instinctively the consequences of misbehavior. Lessons in etiquette, you soon learn, take precedence above all. The girl is drilled in perfect posture, balance and grace, qualities expected of royalty. She is taught how to curtsy deeply enough to honour a foreign dignitary, yet not so deeply as to appear submissive. Imagine a 4-year-old practicing endlessly in front of mirrors, taller than 2 grown men. Her knees wobble and tremble with exhaustion, her tiny arms struggling beneath the weight of heavy brocades. Occasionally her face crumples in frustration, though tears are quickly wiped away by stern-faced governesses determined to mould her into an impeccable royal princess. You can almost hear the soft, measured corrections. Back straight, chin up, hands gently clasped. Royalty must never appear weak, they chide gently. She repeats the movements until they become mechanical, automatic. You wonder idly how long until the spark of childhood rebellion is fully extinguished, until her playful nature is reshaped entirely by duty and decorum. At dinners, the child bride's meals shift abruptly from simple porridges and warm bread to elaborate feasts of roast meats, spiced fruits, and rich pastries she finds overwhelmingly heavy. She picks at her plate, appetite lost beneath the weight of gold utensils and crystal goblets. Occasionally, she reaches out instinctively for something familiar, a piece of fruit perhaps, but quickly remembers the rules, withdrawing her hand silently. She is taught precisely how to hold a fork, sip from ornate cups, and engage in polite conversation. It would almost be humorous if not for the stark reality. These are the manners of a child queen who will someday influence the fates of entire nations. And yet, amid these strange rituals, glimpses of normal childhood occasionally peek through, charmingly incongruous with her royal setting. A kitten sneaks into the room one afternoon, causing a brief moment of pure delight as the tiny bride drops her fork with a clang. Reaching out eagerly, she cradles the small animal tenderly, whispering soft words into its fur. You smile gently at this sight, wondering how long she'll be allowed to keep such innocence before attendants shoo the kitten away, reminding her that playtime has ended. The lessons expand far beyond mere etiquette. Before she learns the alphabet fully, she's instructed in the complexities of royal bloodlines, memorizing names and faces of distant relatives whose connections to her are obscure at best. "This is your cousin twice removed," explains a governess patiently, pointing at portraits of severe-looking men and women. The girl blinks in confusion, nodding vaguely, clearly hoping that remembering such details might please the grown-ups enough to earn back some precious moments of freedom. Her closest attendants recognize her exhaustion, yet they persist, bound by duty themselves. Occasionally, they allow brief breaks for the child to breathe, moments when she gazes wistfully out windows at gardens where once she chased butterflies, laughter echoing brightly. You imagine her dreams at night filled with half-remembered games, Visions of freedom quickly snatched away by the rising sun. Days turn into weeks, then months, each passing moment chipping steadily away at her playful innocence. Occasionally, royal tutors praise her quick grasp of a complicated lesson. Delighting in her early promise as a ruler, they proudly announce her intelligence and poise to visiting dignitaries who gaze at her with curiosity, impressed by the young girl's composure. Yet, you notice beneath her polite smiles, her eyes reflect quiet resignation rather than genuine pride. Still, small rebellions surface, tiny moments of resistance, charmingly childish yet profoundly brave. One afternoon, in the midst of a particularly tedious lesson on treaty negotiations, she deliberately drops her quill onto the pristine parchment, leaving a large black blot that sends her tutors into brief panic. It's a fleeting moment swiftly corrected, yet you smile, cheering silently at her spirit, still fighting stubbornly beneath layers of royal discipline. As the seasons change, her schedule grows even heavier. Language lessons are added, preparing her for diplomatic exchanges she won't grasp fully until years later. French, Latin, and even smatterings of Greek fill her ears, mixed together into a confusing linguistic stew. And yet, remarkably, she begins to absorb bits and pieces, parroting back words perfectly, impressing even her most critical tutors. You marvel silently at her resilience, her remarkable adaptability, despite overwhelming odds. By the time she's nearly 5, the child bride is capable of navigating through delicate diplomatic receptions, moving with an elegance born not from genuine understanding but rote memorization. She greets guests flawlessly, reciting practiced welcomes in multiple languages. Dignitaries watch in awe, whispers of admiration rippling through crowds at this child so perfectly trained. Yet you notice something deeper in their eyes, perhaps sorrow, recognizing a childhood stolen, replaced with relentless pressure and impossibly high expectations. Even her toys shift subtly in purpose. Dolls become miniatures of royal courts. Tiny wooden knights and princesses are arranged carefully to mimic political scenarios. She practices negotiations, playfully, yet with surprising accuracy. You feel a pang watching her recreate battles and alliances with painted wooden figures, wondering how soon these mock scenarios will become her real-life duties. At night, her rooms grow quiet, candles extinguished, lessons finally paused. She lies awake, tiny hands clutching a worn doll hidden carefully beneath silken sheets, her last remnant of true childhood innocence. You sense her quiet longing for simpler times, her dreams drifting far from castle walls toward open fields, laughter and games she barely remembers clearly. You linger beside her bed now, unseen, gently wishing you could reassure her that life might somehow become easier, simpler again. But history rarely eases the burdens of those born into power, especially those chosen so young. Still, beneath heavy silks and royal responsibilities, the spirit of a playful child remains bruised perhaps, battered by obligation, yet still quietly, persistently alive. And as you watch her finally slip into dreams, breathing soft and even, you find yourself quietly hoping that somehow, someday, she'll reclaim even a tiny piece of the joyful innocence stolen so abruptly by politics and destiny. For tonight at least, the child bride rests peacefully beneath starlit skies, her small heart beating softly with quiet, stubborn resilience. Now let your gaze drift slowly away from the child bride's quiet chambers, gently passing through the dim hallways of the castle. Flickering torchlight dances softly upon stone walls, each shadow whispering secrets hidden deep within the palace's history. You follow these shadows now, your steps almost inaudible on thick, woven carpets as you approach a grand yet somber chamber. Here, the weight of decision-making sits heavily on shoulders that, truthfully, seem barely ready for the burden. You pause near an open doorway, unnoticed, as voices filled with concern and perhaps guilt echo gently from within. This is the council chamber, the place where royal destinies are forged, and tonight a fragile child's future hangs delicately upon whispered conversations and hastily signed documents. At the long table, illuminated by the faint glow of candles, sits the child bride's father, the king. His eyes, weary and reddened from sleepless nights, stare absently at scattered scrolls bearing intricate seals and elegant script. His advisors, clustered around him like ravens, murmur gently, careful to keep their voices respectful, yet pressing. The king's fingers nervously tap against the polished wood, betraying anxiety he would never openly confess. Beside him, the queen remains rigidly poised, her elegant posture unwavering. Her face, though calm, holds a quiet, painful tension only a mother's eyes could fully express. She occasionally glances toward her husband, wordlessly begging for reconsideration, for mercy. But duty and diplomacy often drown out softer voices, and the queen knows better than most the bitter compromises royal life demands. You lean in closer now, curiosity tugging gently at your senses, the room's atmosphere thick with the scent of aged parchment, melting wax, and barely concealed sorrow. These parents, entrusted with protecting their daughter's innocence, have found themselves entangled in a political web woven generations earlier. Their decisions aren't entirely their own, dictated instead by treaties signed decades before they were even born, agreements designed to forge stability yet which now feel unbearably harsh. One advisor, an elderly man whose beard glows white beneath the gentle flicker of candlelight, clears his throat delicately. His voice emerges, calm yet tinged with weariness. "My lord, the alliance is crucial. Our borders depend upon this marriage. To break this arrangement would risk war. The cost," he pauses carefully, allowing the heavy silence to emphasize his words, "would be devastating." The king nods slowly, lips tightening slightly. He knows this advisor speaks truthfully. Alliances built on marriage, especially those sealed with royal blood, are rarely broken without disastrous consequences. You watch his knuckles whiten slightly as he grips the edge of the table, clearly wrestling with conflicting duties as a father and ruler. The queen, though quiet, gathers herself gently and speaks, her tone measured but filled with carefully hidden grief. She is a child, barely able to understand what we ask of her. Surely there must be another path, one that preserves both our alliance and our daughter's innocence. Her words linger hopefully in the air, vulnerable and pleading. You almost imagine her holding her breath, waiting desperately for reassurance. But around the table, advisors shift uncomfortably, unwilling, or perhaps unable to offer comforting words. The king meets her gaze briefly, regret shimmering gently in his eyes, before sighing heavily and lowering his head. "My queen," another advisor interjects softly, his tone sympathetic yet firm, "we understand your sorrow, truly. Yet history will judge our decisions harshly if we allow sentiment to weaken our kingdom. She will adapt, as have generations before her." The queen's eyes briefly flash with quiet defiance, her maternal instinct momentarily flaring beneath layers of royal composure. "Adaptation?" she murmurs bitterly. "She's not yet 5, gentlemen. How exactly does a child adapt to such heavy burdens? At what cost?" Her questions hang unanswered in the candlelit chamber, each advisor avoiding direct eye contact, unwilling to voice the uncomfortable truths that everyone present already knows. You watch closely now, understanding the deeper dynamics at play. The parents seated here, despite crowns and titles, are just as powerless, just as bound by expectations as their tiny daughter down the hallway, perhaps even more so, for unlike her, they fully grasp the gravity and permanence of the decisions they make. The king finally speaks again, voice weary but resolute. "It pains me deeply," he begins, each word slow and deliberate. "But our obligations are clear. Our daughter's marriage secures generations of peace. If we falter now, the consequences would haunt our people for decades, perhaps centuries." His voice breaks slightly, betraying deep paternal regret he can scarcely express aloud. Yet his advisors nod solemnly, grateful for the decision made, uncomfortable truth delivered. You watch as servants bring forward a heavy parchment, its edges curling with age. Upon it, intricate script outlines precisely the conditions of this marriage, the signatures and seals of royal ancestors emblazoned prominently, symbols of obligations too powerful to ignore. The king takes up a quill, dipping it into ink, dark as midnight, hand trembling almost imperceptibly. You silently urge him to reconsider, wishing somehow he might find strength enough to reject tradition. to protect the innocent daughter whose childhood slips further away with each stroke of his quill. Yet you know history rarely allows such rebellions, especially within castle walls where the past's weight presses heavily upon each decision. And so, with a final stroke, the document is signed, sealed, and forever bound into the tapestry of history. The king's shoulders slump briefly, a visible admission of sadness quickly replaced by stoic composure. The queen rises gracefully, silently retreating from the room, dignity held high yet clearly shaken. You follow her gentle footsteps, her path guiding you toward chambers softly illuminated by moonlight streaming through tall windows. In solitude, the queen pauses near a window overlooking lush gardens below, silvered beneath starlight. Her eyes shimmer gently, tears held carefully at bay. Her fingers trace lightly across the cold stone ledge, lost in private thoughts she'll never fully voice aloud. You sense her sorrow deeply, the ache of motherhood caught helplessly within royal expectations. Below, night birds sing softly beneath the stars, their songs innocent and free, unaware of palace walls and political intrigues. You briefly envy their simplicity, their unburdened freedom. Yet here, amidst shadowy corridors and whispered secrets, even innocence must bow to necessity, a truth painfully clear to everyone involved. Slowly, you return your gaze toward the child bride's chamber, where she sleeps softly beneath silk covers, oblivious to decisions made tonight. Tomorrow, attendants will gently explain her new reality, carefully framing obligations she cannot yet fully grasp. But for tonight, at least she dreams innocently beneath starlit skies, shielded briefly from harsh truths. Quietly, you step back into shadow, gently withdrawing from castle walls filled with whispered sadness and silent regret. Though history's weight presses firmly upon parents and children alike, tonight at least offers gentle reprieve, a quiet pause before dawn returns, bringing new duties and deeper understanding of choices made beneath candlelight's gentle flicker. And as you drift slowly back toward wakefulness, the castle's soft whispers lingering gently, you find yourself grateful for simpler lives and kinder destinies, paths less burdened by royal crowns, ancient parchments, and childhood sacrificed upon the altar of political necessity. Sleep gives way to sunlight, slanting through stained glass in jewel-bright rays, painting the small, chilly chamber in shifting colour. The world outside the castle is waking, birds calling, horses stamping in the courtyards. But here inside, the morning belongs to duty. Somewhere below, servants bustle to ready the day's feasts and receptions. But in the nursery, a room that is already losing its right to be called such, the air carries a hush that feels both holy and a little bit haunted. Somewhere below, servants bustle to ready the day's feasts and receptions. But in the nursery, a room that is already losing its right to be called such, the air carries a hush that feels both holy and a little bit haunted. You're there with her, rising with the creak of the door as a parade of attendants enters. Ladies in waiting, a greying governess, and a gentle maid with soft eyes who tries to slip the girl's favourite carved lamb into her hand. The token is accepted with a sleepy squeeze, the only resistance the child bride can muster against the sea of instructions soon to pour over her head. This is not just any day, this is the beginning of her training, her transformation from playroom occupant to miniature queen. The lessons start almost before she's fully awake. You watch as her governess helps her from the bed, so small her feet barely touch the floor as she sits on the edge, eyes half closed and mouth slightly open in confusion. She is wrapped in a velvet robe with fur trim, a soft luxury meant to soothe, but it is heavy and confining, just like everything else now pressing down upon her. Breakfast is served on a silver tray, covered by a domed lid, and when it's lifted, she blinks in disappointment. No porridge, no honeyed milk, just stewed fruits, neat slices of bread, and watered wine. A joke flits through your mind. Order up, one grown-up meal for the world's smallest adult, but the smile fades quickly as you watch her nibble dutifully, glancing at her attendants for approval before swallowing. The first lesson is not letters or numbers, but silence. She is taught to speak only when spoken to answer directly but with grace, to modulate her voice like a delicate instrument. Her governess, Madame Genevieve, demonstrates the proper way to say thank you in 3 languages. You watch the child's lips stumble over French and Latin. When she misses a word, the correction is gentle but firm. She repeats, slower, until the sounds lose all meaning and become nothing but a pattern to be memorized. And then comes posture. Back straight, chin lifted, feet together, hands folded, always folded. The girl is propped up on a velvet cushion, surrounded by mirrors. At first, it's a game. She sticks her tongue out at her reflection, then giggles. The governess frowns and quietly admonishes her to compose yourself, Your Highness. You feel the child's spark dim just a little, the joke falling away. Once, not long ago, mornings were spent chasing sunbeams and wooden hoops. Now she learns to walk with a book balanced on her head. 3 steps. Pause. 3 steps more. She falters. The book tumbles, and a tiny sigh escapes. The maid with the gentle eyes quickly retrieves it, her smile soft, her sympathy unspoken. And as the hours slip by, the parade of lessons grows stranger still. You watch her being shown the proper way to receive a guest. First a deep curtsy, then a smile, not too broad, not too timid. She practices greetings for dukes and bishops, repeats the correct forms of address, and listens as Madame Genevieve explains how to spot a fake compliment. People will try to trick you, even as a child, says the governess. Especially as a child, your innocence is your only shield. The sun climbs higher. Now, a tutor arrives, and the little bride is led to a table stacked with documents. She listens as the family tree is recited, the names of ancestors repeated like prayers, each one tied to a treaty, a battle, a scandal. She's expected to remember them, to know whom to trust and whom to fear, even if she doesn't yet understand why. For a moment, you catch her gaze drifting longingly to the open window, where a pigeon perches and coos. You want to tell her it's okay to daydream, that kings and queens were once dreamers too, but the lesson continues, relentless. She traces lines on the map with a chubby finger, following rivers and borders that will one day define her world. After lunch, more grown-up food, less eaten than played with, comes the strangest lesson yet, queenly deportment. It means learning how to accept gifts with gratitude, but also suspicion, to recognize the difference between a friend and a spy, to smile for portraits, even when sad. A gold locket is placed in her palm, the family crest pressed into the metal. "This is yours now," says her mother, appearing briefly in the doorway. "It's your duty to wear it always." The child nods, her fingers curling around the cold, unfamiliar weight. There is, as always, a shadow of loneliness in the room, a quiet sense of something lost. You can't help but notice how the other children, the pages, the stable boy glimpsed in the courtyard, move with more ease, laugh more freely. For them, there is still play. For her, there is only preparation. It's not that her parents don't love her. You see it in her mother's eyes, the way she lingers a moment too long before leaving the room, the way her father squeezes her shoulder before a lesson. But their love has been pressed and polished into something almost unrecognizable by expectation, ambition, and the chilling fear of political disaster. As the day draws to a close, the lessons continue, shifting from mind to body. She is taught to sit through long dinners without fidgeting, to nod at jokes she doesn't understand, to keep secrets even from herself. At one point, a jester is brought in, his silly face is meant to coax laughter. She tries, bless her, but it comes out thin and tired. You sense the adults noticing, but what can they do? This is the life she must now lead. Bath time is a ritual in itself. Warm water scented with rose petals, a dozen hands washing and drying and brushing her hair until it shines like polished gold. She sits quietly, letting it happen, eyes half closed. You wonder if she imagines she's somewhere else, a peasant child in a wildflower field perhaps, or a runaway on a distant shore. Anything but this. Then pajamas, a gown of the finest linen, soft but impossibly stiff with embroidery and lace. She clutches her lamb tightly, the maid tucking her in with a whispered goodnight. Tomorrow, the maid promises, will be easier, but you know better. Tomorrow will be another day of lessons, of learning how to be a queen before she ever learned how to be herself. Night falls, and the castle grows still. The only sound is the distant music of the wind in the towers and the quiet breathing of a child made to grow up too soon. You linger at her bedside for a moment, offering what comfort you can, and as she finally drifts into a restless sleep, you hope that somewhere in her dreams the games and laughter return, even if just for a while. The air in the castle's grandest hall hangs thick and expectant, vibrating with the low, murmuring energy of too many voices squeezed into too small a space. You're ushered gently forward along with the rest of the assembly toward the marble pillars that frame the cathedral-like room. Outside, church bells clang, calling townsfolk and nobility alike to witness what has never been meant for small children, a royal wedding procession, but with a bride whose feet can barely reach the steps. It begins with the dressing, a ceremony in itself. Hours before the church bells toll, the child is woken well before dawn by the soft touch of maids, the snap of fire being kindled, and the soft hiss of hot water poured into basins. You watch as she is lifted, half asleep, into a cloud of linen and silk. Hair is brushed, pulled and twisted, then finally braided and adorned with jeweled pins, so heavy you suspect she may tip sideways. Each layer is added with purpose. The chemise of snow-white linen, the silk underdress, the outer robe that shimmers silver blue in the firelight, stiff with embroidery and pearls. The entire castle seems to crowd into a tiny chamber, offering advice, fussing over details, and occasionally sneaking in a quiet blessing under their breath. Her mother, pale and drawn but determined, inspects the finishing touches, the miniature girdle of gold at her waist, the shoes dyed the colour of violets, soft but with stiff, unyielding soles. The child stares down at her slippers, wiggling her toes as if she half hopes she'll wake up or run away. But there's nowhere to run, not from the dress, not from the ceremony, not from history's greedy gaze. When the final veil is lowered, it transforms her. Suddenly, she's both there and not there. A tiny ghost behind layers of lace, a symbol rather than a child. Her eyes are large, rimmed with confusion and a little sleep, and she blinks as the candlelight makes patterns across the delicate fabric that drapes her face. As the processional music swells from the chapel below, someone whispers, "It's time." You watch her flinch almost imperceptibly. Her hand tightens around the lamb token tucked inside her sleeve, and then, with practiced hands and hearts pounding, the adults arrange themselves for the walk. First, the herald voice cracking as he announces the occasion to the gathered crowd. Then the high-born guests, each swishing past in brocade and velvet. At last, the little bride is lifted by her governess and gently placed on the floor at the entrance to the long carpeted aisle. You feel the world narrow to that crimson path. The hall is silent, save for the echo of small shoes, barely audible over the heartbeat in your ears. She walks as she was taught, each step measured, chin up as best she can manage under the weight of pearls. The faces she passes blur together, some curious, some openly weeping, others carefully blank. The old bishop at the altar clears his throat, barely concealing his discomfort. The crowd leans in, eager to witness the event, but also anxious, if not for the child, then for the fragile peace her marriage represents. The music hushes. The air feels thick and stifling, every eye on the aisle as the procession approaches. A few in the crowd, old nurses, young children, even a visiting noblewoman with 5 daughters of her own, reach for handkerchiefs, dabbing at eyes, or clutching them for comfort. The men remain mostly still, caught between pride and embarrassment. You watch her father, standing at the front, chest puffed out, but lips tight. You see her mother's knuckles turn white as she clasps her hands. No one moves to help the girl when she stumbles slightly, only recovers and pushes forward, tiny shoulders set with grim determination. At the altar, the groom waits, awkward, older, nervous. Not a villain, not a monster, but a boy himself, caught in a net of expectation. His tunic is stiff with embroidery, his shoes so new they squeak against the flagstones. He glances at his bride, and for a moment you catch something like shame or fear in his eyes. You wonder if he wishes he could disappear too. The bishop's voice rises and falls through the ancient service, words carved from centuries of repetition. He blesses the union, asks for favour, recites lines that have outlived 1,000 royal families. The vows, memorized by everyone in the hall, are recited to a child who can barely pronounce them. She repeats words she doesn't understand, glancing at her mother for silent guidance. The ring, a golden band so heavy it slips from her knuckle, slides onto her finger with a little help. There is no protest, no drama, just a tired acceptance. The surrender of a child who has learned that no is not in her vocabulary. A hush falls. For a split second, you imagine the entire castle holding its breath, listening for the sound of history changing. Somewhere outside, a bell tolls again, too loud, too sudden, and the moment is broken. After the ceremony, the procession moves to the great hall, the guests pouring in to find their places at the long tables. The smell of roasting meats, sweet breads, and spiced wine fills the air. But the mood is uneasy. The guests raise goblets and make speeches, some of them absurdly grand, long toasts to the future of Europe, to peace and prosperity, to the wisdom of the king's decision. You catch snippets of more honest conversation at the far end of the hall. "Poor child," mutters an old nurse, "and may God watch over her," whispers a visiting priest. The feast itself is overwhelming, the tables groaning with food the child has never tasted. She sits beside her new husband, who tries not to fidget, but fails, picking at the tablecloth with nervous fingers. Plates are filled and refilled for her, but she barely eats, nibbling at a sugared plum before staring down at her plate. She tries to remember what she's supposed to do, smile, nod, say thank you, but not too loud. She does everything right, and yet nothing feels real. You notice her glancing down at her lap, fingers absently tracing the seams of her slippers. She looks smaller than ever at the enormous table, lost between adults whose laughter booms and echoes around her. Every so often a guest bends down to say something kindly meant, but the words go over her head. Occasionally her eyes drift shut. You wonder how long she's gone without proper rest, and if anyone will notice when she begins to nod off in the middle of a toast. Then come the gifts, stacked high on tables draped in velvet, jewels, bolts of silk, tiny golden animals, hand-carved music boxes that play lullabies from distant lands, all meant to dazzle, to soothe, to buy favour, or perhaps to distract from the reality of what has just transpired. The gifts are admired, catalogued and stored away by the household staff. The child touches them one by one, offering a polite thank you before the treasures are whisked from her sight. As the feast wears on, the mood grows heavier. The older guests talk louder, some to hide their discomfort, some to keep the party alive. The young ones are shuffled off to their beds, but the bride remains, eyes wide and glazed, caught in the swirl of celebration she cannot join. You watch as her governess leans in to whisper something soothing, perhaps a promise that it will all be over soon. Finally, when the candles have burned low and the music fades, the crowd disperses. The little bride is led from the hall, her steps unsteady on the long stone corridors. Her slippers, once so beautiful, now pinch her feet. Her head aches from the weight of the crown, and the pearls woven into her hair feel like stones. Her new husband walks beside her, equally silent. He reaches out a hand, awkwardly, and after a moment, she takes it. There's a strange comfort in this gesture. Two children, bound by a fate they didn't choose, walking side by side into a future neither can imagine. They disappear into the darkness of the corridor, leaving behind a hall littered with crumbs and confetti, empty goblets, and the echo of ancient vows. Outside, the night air is sharp with the scent of rain. Somewhere in the garden, a nightingale sings, and you, still watching, feel the weight of centuries pressing in. You wonder how many other children have walked these same halls, their futures bartered away in the name of peace and power. You wonder what will become of her, if the world will remember her name, or if she'll be just another shadow in the castle's long history. But for now, you hold her story close, feeling its softness and its sorrow. In the hush that follows, you imagine her tucked into bed at last, her lamb clutched tightly in her arms. Her eyes drift shut, her breathing slows. Tomorrow, the lessons will begin again, but tonight, for just a moment, she is allowed to rest. Morning slides quietly into the palace, curling under doorways and peeking through frosted windows. It brings a strange kind of stillness, the hush that settles after days of ceremony, feasting and expectation. In the golden hush, the castle is caught between worlds, no longer a place of childhood innocence, not yet fully a home to royal power. Somewhere in this shifting space, you join the little bride as she wakes to her first morning. As both a wife and a ward, her new life set out before her like a complicated, oversized puzzle. Her bedchamber feels unfamiliar now, the soft sheets smelling faintly of rosewater and nervous sweat. You watch her stretch sleepily, blinking in the soft dawn light. That she doesn't cry, though you sense the urge flickering beneath her ribs. Instead, she slips out of bed, feet hitting the cold stone floor, and tiptoes toward the window. Below, the gardens are heavy with dew, empty except for the kitchen cat stalking a robin. For a fleeting moment, she almost forgets herself and presses her nose to the glass, giggling at the cat's wobbly chase. But a cough at the door reminds her she is not alone, not truly ever again. Her governess enters, gentle but brisk, carrying a fresh dress and a set of silver brushes. The morning routine begins anew. But today, the lessons are different. There is no more talk of wedding dresses or royal processions. Instead, the training focuses on survival, how to thrive within the golden cage, how to navigate the world of court where games are played with smiles as sharp as daggers. You follow her through the slow parade of lessons, each one a stepping stone across a river she can barely see, let alone cross alone. First come the manners, drilled with even greater precision now that she is a married lady. Her seat at breakfast is changed, moved up the table closer to the center, a signal to the entire household of her new status. Diet. You see her try to hide her discomfort, tiny fingers plucking nervously at her napkin as the household eyes her, measuring her every move. The food is familiar, fresh bread, honey, a boiled egg, but the taste is different now, as if responsibility itself has altered the flavor. Once breakfast is over, a stream of tutors arrives. Historians, musicians, mathematicians, each eager to leave their mark on the royal mind. She is expected to remember not only names and dates, but the subtleties of language, the nuances of debate, the intricacies of etiquette. You watch her furrow her brow as she listens to a lesson on heraldry, her tiny hand sketching uncertain lions and griffins on a piece of parchment. When the teacher's attention wanders, she draws a daisy and quickly covers it with her sleeve. Myths and dates, but the subtleties of language, the nuances of debate, the intricacies of etiquette. You watch her furrow her brow as she listens to a lesson on heraldry, her tiny hand sketching uncertain lions and griffins on a piece of parchment. When the teacher's attention wanders, she draws a daisy and quickly covers it with her sleeve. But the true education, the one no tutor names allowed, begins when the lessons end. It is found in the corridors, where groups of ladies gossip behind feathered fans, their voices soft and dangerous. It is written on the faces of the older children at court, who eye her with a mix of envy, curiosity, and calculation. At playtime, she is never quite sure who is her friend and who is merely practicing for a future rivalry. You join her in the palace gardens that afternoon, where she walks under heavy cloaks beside her husband, who is trying his best to be kind, but is still, after all, just a boy. He offers her a daisy he found by the hedge. She takes it, smiling politely, unsure if she's supposed to thank him, bow, or simply pretend not to notice. Their conversation is awkward, made up of half-remembered lessons and childhood nonsense. Occasionally she glances toward the older girls clustered beneath the arbor, their laughter shrill, their eyes watchful. Inside, she finds solace in small, secret ways. She discovers a hiding spot behind a tapestry, where she can listen to the kitchen maids tell stories or catch snippets of gossip from the passing guards. Sometimes she sneaks a sweet from the pantry, feeling a giddy thrill at the rule-breaking. Other times she simply sits in the window seat, staring out at the world and dreaming of escape, perhaps to a distant land where girls wear simple dresses and climb trees without fear. But the court is never truly at rest, and even playtime is watched, evaluated, weighed against invisible scales. If she laughs too loudly, a nurse gently reminds her to lower her voice. If she runs too quickly, a maid cautions her not to scuff her shoes. The message is clear. There is no room for error, not for the king's precious alliance. Every gesture is a lesson, every mistake a warning. As the days slip by, she learns to speak in careful riddles, to hide her real feelings behind polite smiles. She befriends the daughter of a visiting lord, but quickly realizes that secrets are currency, traded as freely as ribbons or sweets. Sometimes she finds herself longing for the days when her world was as simple as a circle of dolls and a sunbeam on the floor. Even the palace games have changed. Where once there were lively chases and wild laughter, now there are subdued games of chess, intricate puzzles, and gentle walks in the rose garden. She learns to listen, to notice who whispers and who shouts, who always wins and who is allowed to lose. You watch her eyes grow wiser, her posture a touch more guarded, her laughter quieter but still bright when it finds a safe space to bloom. And yet, even here, there are moments of joy. On one particularly blustery afternoon, the wind tears through the courtyard and whips her veil away, sending it tumbling into the fish pond. She bursts out laughing, truly laughing, and for a moment, everyone else laughs too. The tension breaks. Even the governess smiles. It is a small rebellion, but an important one, a reminder that childhood, though battered, is not so easily erased. In the evenings, she sits with her mother by the fire. The queen braids her hair, humming softly, and for a little while the roles are reversed. No lessons, no tutors, just mother and daughter sharing a quiet, ordinary moment. Sometimes, her mother tells her stories of her own childhood, a world of games and friends and, yes, mistakes that were forgiven and forgotten. You sense a silent promise in those moments, a hope that somehow the world will be kinder to this small bride than it was to her mother. And so, day by day, she learns to survive the games of court, not with swords or power, but with patience, observation, and the occasional burst of laughter. She carves out spaces for herself, however small, wherever she can. Behind the tapestry by the pantry, at her mother's knee, she gathers the fragments of her lost childhood and weaves them into a secret armor. Perhaps you think that is how all queens are forged, not in the heat of battle, but in the quiet endurance of impossible days. As night falls, you find her in bed again, the castle outside her window lit with golden lamps. She holds her lamb close, eyes wide in the darkness. There are monsters in her storybooks, but the real monsters are harder to see. Disappointment, loneliness, the ache of being so small in a world so large and unforgiving. And yet, as she drifts to sleep, you sense her resolve growing, soft but unbreakable. Outside, the wind rattles the windows and the towers sigh with age. The palace is full of secrets, and she is learning to keep her own. In the quiet of the night, you whisper a silent wish for her, a hope that in the tangle of grown-up games and gilded cages, she will never forget how to play. The castle's long corridors echo with the soft, purposeful footsteps of women, nurses, maids, governesses, each gliding past in a swirl of linen and wool. Their voices rise and fall in gentle reminders, careful corrections, and quiet reassurances, but their work today carries a strange heaviness. For the child bride, the world is shifting. Her daily lessons are no longer limited to posture or polite laughter. Now the instruction grows stranger, darker, more complicated. A surreal apprenticeship in womanhood before she can even write her own name. You see her at the edge of the bed, clutching her familiar lamb as the sunlight streams through high windows. The old nurse, Mother Ines, sets down a heavy basket on the linen chest and sighs. "Time to dress, little dove," she says, her voice as kind as she can make it. The girl lets go of the toy reluctantly, bracing herself for the day's new demands. First comes the ritual of grooming, a procedure far removed from the gentle hair brushing of months ago. Her hair must be parted, plaited, oiled, and adorned with ribbons in her family colours. The governess explains, in low tones, that her appearance is not only a reflection of her house, but of her future worth as a queen, a wife, a mother. The little girl sits still, only wincing when the comb tugs too harshly or a pin bites into her scalp. To protest would be childish, and she is reminded daily, childishness is a privilege she must now relinquish. Afterward, a physician enters, his presence marking the shift in lessons. He does not speak to her, but to the assembled women, explaining in a tone she cannot quite understand the importance of diets, sleep, and physical strength. She is weighed, measured, prodded, poked. Everything is written in a little book, her body already a public ledger for the future of the realm. When she fidgets, the physician's assistant gently guides her chin upward, peering into her eyes and mouth as if searching for evidence of queenliness in the set of her jaw. Breakfast is served, and the nurse encourages her to eat every bite, for a healthy queen must not be a picky eater. She chews slowly, obediently, but her mind drifts far away, counting the birds outside the window, inventing stories about knights and dragons that do not belong to the world of heavy curtains and waiting ladies. Then comes the most unsettling lesson yet, a session with the midwife. The women of the court gather, her mother included, around a table set with miniature clothes, swaddling blankets, and a baby-shaped doll. The girl is shown how to hold the doll, how to wrap it tightly, how to rock it back and forth and hum a lullaby. "This is what mothers do," her governess says. The midwife demonstrates the proper grip, and when the child cradles the doll too loosely, her hand is adjusted with patient firmness. The lessons grow stranger. She is told about future duties, about the honor of producing sons and daughters for the good of the kingdom. The words are dressed up in stories and gentle metaphors, gardens, seeds, harvests, but the meaning hovers just beyond her grasp, a shadow that grows longer with every passing day. You watch as she nods along, her mind spinning with confusion and curiosity, trying to piece together the fragments of knowledge offered in riddles. Sometimes, during these lessons, the ladies exchange glances, sympathy mingling with resignation. You sense that many of them walked this same path, taught these same rituals before they'd ever lost a baby tooth. You imagine the echoes of their own girlhoods, lost to duty and tradition, resurfacing in the faces of their daughters and wards. After a while, the girl is allowed to play, but even playtime is a lesson now. She is given a tiny kitchen set and shown how to stir an imaginary pot, how to prepare meals, how to set a perfect table. The line between pretend and preparation blurs. She recites polite greetings and pours invisible tea, her actions closely observed by the women. Sometimes she steals a glance at her old wooden knights and sighs. Play acting at queenship is not nearly as fun as storming imaginary castles. Once she sneaks away to the nursery window, longing for a breath of freedom. Below, in the orchard, the older children, servants, sons and daughters, run in wild, noisy games. She presses her hand to the glass, wishing for just a second to swap places. The wish is interrupted when a page arrives, announcing her presence is needed for the next lesson. She straightens her back, wipes her eyes, and walks quietly toward the door. The next session is embroidery, a skill every royal lady must master, or so she's told. The room is filled with older girls and women, their fingers nimble and practiced. She is given a hoop, a length of silk, and a needle, the point far too sharp for a child. Her mother sits nearby, offering encouragement, but the lesson is more about patience than skill. The little bride pricks her finger and stifles a yelp. The governess dabs away the blood, offering a gentle reminder, queens must never show pain. The hours drag on, stitches accumulating, the patterns never quite matching those of the older girls. You watch her shoulders sag, the strain showing in her posture. But there are small victories too. A flower that comes out almost right, a ribbon that lies flat. When her mother praises her, the smile is genuine. Fleeting though it may be, later the priest visits for a lesson in prayer. He instructs her on the correct posture, the right words, the significance of each gesture. She clasps her hands, bows her head, and tries to listen, though her thoughts wander. Pray for wisdom, pray for strength, the priest says. She closes her eyes, and just for a moment, prays for something simpler. A warm bed, a happy friend, a day without lessons. As the afternoon wanes, the midwife returns to discuss womanly health, this time with more veiled warnings about too much running, too little sleep, too many sweets. Her body, she is told, is precious, a vessel for the future. It is not really her own, not anymore. In quieter moments, the child bride is visited by her grandmother, who tells stories of her own girlhood tales that blend history and fairy tale. When I was small, I wore a crown of daisies, not gold. The old woman laughs, tucking a stray curl behind her granddaughter's ear. In these moments, you sense the old joys flicker again, a faint reminder of a gentler past. Evening comes. Dinner is another trial of patience. Sitting still, eating carefully, listening to adult conversation that flows over her head like a river. Sometimes she is called on to recite a poem or sing a short song, her voice trembling with nerves, but strong with practice. When the meal is over and the hall empties, she finds a quiet corner in her chamber, her lamb in her lap, and traces the embroidered flowers on her new gown. She is tired beyond words, her eyelids heavy, her mind a swirl of lessons and warnings. But in the silence, she hums a lullaby she made up herself, just for her, just for tonight. You linger with her as she drifts to sleep, your heart heavy with the knowledge of what's been lost, and yet quietly hopeful for what small pieces of girlhood she still clings to. In the darkness, the lessons of the day seem far away, and she dreams, perhaps, of a world where being a child is duty enough. Moonlight slips across the stone floors and up the carved posts of the child bride's canopied bed, laying silvery patterns atop the velvet coverlet. The castle, so full of music and voices only days before, now lies quiet, the feast long ended, the guests departed. Yet in her chambers, an entirely new world has begun to accumulate, one of tokens, tributes and treasures that seem more suited to a museum than a child's bedroom. You rise with her, early, to discover the room transformed. Along the window seat, a mountain of wedding gifts stretches toward the glass, silk-wrapped boxes tied with golden ribbons, polished wooden chests glinting with brass, bolts of rare fabrics folded as precisely as royal decrees. There are delicate paintings and miniature carriages, baskets of preserved fruits and candied violets, silver cups engraved with her initials in elaborate script. Every surface glitters with diplomatic hope. It is overwhelming, even to look at. The little bride pads barefoot across the carpet, pausing at a dazzling display of jeweled hairpins, some so heavy she can barely lift them. She turns over a golden music box in her hands, winding it hesitantly. A lullaby tinkles out, fragile and sweet, but the song only sharpens the ache of longing. You see it in her eyes, the yearning for something simpler, for a single toy to love, not a room full of treasures she must thank people for and never touch again. As the sun rises higher, the gifts are paraded before her by the nurse and governess, who catalogue each one carefully in a ledger. The tally becomes a lesson of its own. This silk is from Aragon. See the crest, her governess instructs, showing her the embroidered sigil of a far-off land. That necklace comes from a king whose ships cross the world. You must remember which ambassador brought which present. Each gift, it seems, is not just an object, but a question of loyalty, a chess piece in the invisible game of court. A parade of visitors arrives throughout the day. Nobles, diplomats, wealthy merchants, all eager to see the child bride's reaction to their offerings. Each expects a perfect curtsy, a smile of delight, a formal thank you that must be practiced and sincere. She repeats the script a dozen times, her voice growing smaller with every repetition. Some of the gifts are almost comically unsuited for a child. An enormous tapestry depicting the history of her husband's family, a carved ivory box with a puzzle lock she cannot open, a velvet cloak lined with ermine that drags behind her like a river of snow. Others, though, catch her heart for a moment. A painted wooden horse from a visiting duke, a set of storybooks filled with impossible creatures. These she tucks away under her pillow, small acts of rebellion in a world determined to weigh her down with gold. By midday, she is exhausted. You watch as she sinks onto a cushioned stool, the day's thank yous muddling together in her mind. The gifts keep coming. Baskets of rare spices, silver bells, strings of pearls, tiny shoes that glint like dragon scales. The maids marvel at the bounty, but she seems to shrink under its sheer abundance. Her own belongings, the simple lamb, the doll with worn hair pushed farther and farther from view. With every treasure, another weight is added to her already burdened heart. Her nurse notices, and after the last group of visitors has gone, she gathers the girl in her arms. "It's all too much, isn't it, pet? she whispers. The child nods, pressing her face into the nurse's shoulder, allowing herself the luxury of tears for just a moment. But the world does not stop for grief, and soon she is summoned to dress for yet another audience. The ceremonial gown is beautiful but cumbersome, its skirt so heavy she can hardly lift her feet. The gold belt cinches tightly at her waist, a symbol of her new station, but also a reminder of everything she's lost. You see the effort it takes not to complain, to hold her head high even as the jewels pinch and the bodice presses too tight. She is led down the corridor to the great hall, where the adults await, eager to see her in her finery. The compliments are well-meaning, but they sting. "What a perfect little queen," says an elderly aunt, dabbing at her eyes. "Look how she shines," exclaims a nobleman, as if the luster of silk and gold can erase the shadow behind the child's eyes. Early aunt, dabbing at her eyes. "Look how she shines," exclaims a nobleman, as if the luster of silk and gold can erase the shadow behind the child's eyes. The pageantry seems endless. Each gift must be displayed, each new dress admired, every courtesy repaid. When she wobbles beneath the weight of the crown, her mother steadies her gently, whispering, "Just a little longer, darling." The reassurance is thin, a fragile thread holding the child together as she performs the role assigned to her. Later, after the last guest departs, the little bride is finally allowed to slip out of her stiff shoes and tiptoe back to her chamber. Alone at last, she digs through the piles of gifts for something familiar. Something hers. She finds her lamb ragged but bedded, and hugs it fiercely, burying her face in its wool. You sit with her in the quiet, watching as she lines up her new treasures, some to be hidden, some to be endured. It strikes you how little is truly hers, how even the simplest pleasures must be filtered through the needs of the kingdom, the expectations of the court, and yet, in the softness of twilight, there is hope. The nurse appears with a tray of warm milk and honey, tucks the girl into bed, and brushes the hair from her face. "You did well, my love," she murmurs. "You were brave," the child sighs, letting go of the day's weight, if only for a moment. In the safety of her covers, surrounded by gifts meant to soothe but which only remind her of the world's demands, she closes her eyes and slips into dreams. There, at least, she is unburdened, free to run barefoot through fields of wildflowers, to ride her wooden horse across imaginary kingdoms, to be simply a child if only for the span of a night. You linger in the gentle dark, a silent witness to her resilience. The gifts may be heavy, the gowns too grand, but her spirit, quiet, stubborn, and full of longing, remains untouched. Even now, in the deepest chambers of a castle built for others, she finds a way to keep herself whole. The castle's treasures grow by the day, but its rules never loosen their grip. With the ceremony ended and the gifts sorted, a new reality sets in, one marked by a strange kind of isolation. It is the playroom, once a haven for games and laughter, that first reveals the difference. You step inside with her and feel it at once. The space is unchanged, yet everything within it has shifted. Here, where sunlight used to pour in and scatter across dolls and building blocks, the air now feels heavy, as if every toy and painted panel is holding its breath. The walls still bear painted scenes of nights and forests, but the sounds of cheerful play have faded into a careful, practiced quiet. You see the child bride hesitate at the threshold, peering inside as if searching for her old self among the shadows. The lamb is waiting, propped on a chair beside a doll in a faded gown. The girl picks it up and hugs it tightly, eyes closed for a long moment. She turns to the nurse, her voice barely a whisper. "May I play today?" The question lingers in the room, thick with longing. The nurse nods and gently urges her forward, but even as she moves into the playroom, her steps are hesitant, watchful. She glances over her shoulder at the closed door, no longer just a barrier to the rest of the castle, but a silent guard, locked each afternoon. It's not for her protection, not really. The nurse, trying to soften the truth, claims it is for safety and quiet. Yet both you and the child sense the change. Where once friends might burst in, laughter echoing, now only a single companion is allowed at a time, and always under the watchful eye of an adult. Her world has grown both smaller and heavier. Today's companion is a distant cousin, a little older, trained like her to speak softly and move carefully. Together they sit cross-legged on the carpet, arranging wooden animals in an orderly parade. The cousin glances at the nurse, then whispers, "Do you miss your old room?" The child bride nods, cheeks pink. "I liked when we could run in the halls." The cousin just smiles sadly, adding, "Now we're meant to act proper, like grown-ups." They both sigh, a sound far too old for such small children. Their games, when they happen, are careful and quiet. No more shrieking, no wild gallops on broomstick horses. The rules now are strict. Games must be educational, gentle, and above all, dignified. The toys themselves reflect this change. The painted soldiers have been replaced with chess sets, the rag dolls with porcelain ladies in stiff skirts. You watch her turn one of these new dolls over in her hands, searching for warmth and finding only cold porcelain. But children are resilient, and even locked doors cannot entirely erase imagination. In the hush, the girls invent stories. One day, the dolls are secret princesses plotting escape from an evil sorcerer. The next, they're merchants sailing to faraway lands. Their voices remain hushed, but there are moments of delight, a shared giggle, a joke whispered behind a cupped hand. The laughter is different now, cautious but real, like a bird that's learned to sing through the bars of a cage. Yet the locked playroom is a symbol she cannot ignore. Sometimes she presses her ear to the door, hoping for a stray sound from the corridor, a passing footstep, a distant laugh, a snatch of song from the kitchens below. It's always faint, just out of reach, but she holds on to these fragments, tucking them away as proof the world beyond her chamber still exists. Lessons follow playtime. As always, they seem to chase her from room to room. Etiquette in the morning, penmanship in the afternoon, a new language after supper. The locked playroom isn't just about physical boundaries. It's about learning which parts of herself must be hidden, which voices must be quieted. The message is clear. Privacy is a luxury reserved for others. Every word, every game, every friendship must be measured and accounted for. You watch the nurse glance at the clock, gently signaling the end of play. The toys are gathered up, the dolls set neatly back on their shelf. The cousin is led away, her eyes lingering on the little bride in silent farewell. The nurse takes the child's hand and leads her back into the wider, colder world of the castle's corridors. In the hallway, servants pass with polite nods. Some smile kindly, but their eyes rarely meet hers for long. She feels their gaze nonetheless, watchful, assessing, always just a little wary. Rumors drift on the air, stories whispered behind closed doors about the little queen and her locked world. At dinner, the adults talk over her head, conversations swirling with intrigue and alliances. She listens quietly, fingers twisting her napkin under the table, half wishing she could fade away entirely. Her new husband sits beside her, equally silent, his feet barely reaching the floor. They share a look now and then, an unspoken understanding that neither belongs in this world, not really. The evening ends as it always does, with the child bride returned to her chamber, the nurse checking the windows and doors before finally bidding her goodnight. Alone, she curls up beneath the covers, tracing the pattern of the canopy above. She remembers the locked playroom and wonders how many doors she will encounter in her life. How many will close against her? How many will open only with the right words or the right smile? You sit beside her as sleep approaches, the moonlight settling softly on her face. Even in the quiet, you sense her mind racing with questions. Will I ever be free again? Will I always be watched, weighed, measured? But just before she drifts off, she hugs her lamb tightly and whispers a promise to herself, a tiny vow that someday she will find the key to every door. In the darkness, her dreams are wild again, unbound by rules or locked rooms. She chases sunlight through endless gardens, climbs towers taller than any castle, rides horses that fly like birds. In dreams, she is queen of her own world, her laughter loud and unafraid. And as the night deepens, you find comfort in her hope, the quiet rebellion of a heart that, even locked away, keeps searching for open sky. It is feast day in the castle again, though to the child bride it feels like every day is a pageant of rituals. The great hall is swept and decorated with fresh boughs of rosemary and bay. Tables groan beneath platters of roast capon, glazed fruit, honey cakes, and towers of bread so high she half expects a bird to fly down and perch atop them. There is laughter, clinking goblets, and the constant drone of voices, but for her, the joy is as distant as the sun behind a cloud. You watch her being dressed for the occasion, an event that begins hours before the first guest enters the hall. Her new gown is green velvet, stitched with tiny pearls at the collar and cuffs. It is beautiful and heavy, so heavy she needs help just to lift her skirts high enough to descend the staircase. Around her neck, a gold chain prickles her skin. Her slippers, though meant for comfort, pinch at the toes. But discomfort is not disgust. She is a queen now, and queens do not whimper. Today's meal is not just a meal, but another performance. She is seated on a cushioned bench at the high table, placed between her husband and her mother. To her right sits a dignitary from a far-off kingdom. To her left, an elderly aunt who seems to exist only to whisper corrections in her ear. Sit up straight. Use the silver knife. Don't let your elbows touch the table. The child nods and obeys, her appetite lost before the first course is served. The guests raise goblets and offer toasts. To the bride, they shout. To peace. To the future of the realm. The words swirl above her like birds, colourful and meaningless. Her husband tries to carve meat for her, hands shaking so badly he nearly launches a piece onto her lap. You catch her trying not to giggle, her first smile of the day, quickly stifled when her aunt clears her throat pointedly. She looks down at the bounty before her and realizes she is not hungry, not for food, not for praise, not for any of this endless pageantry. The feast stretches on, course after course, servants refilling her goblet, piling her plate, and whisking away the untouched morsels before she can protest. She takes a single bite of sweetmeat and sets down her fork, her stomach fluttering. The hall's noise feels oppressive, the faces of the grown-ups looming, their expectations as thick as the smoke from the roast goose. Music plays in the background, a lute, a harp, a flute trilling like a nightingale trapped behind stone walls. She lets her mind drift, imagining the notes as birds escaping, flitting through the open windows to the fields beyond the castle walls. But even her daydreams are interrupted by the rituals of the meal. As the feast continues, she is presented with gifts yet again, each one accompanied by a long speech. A necklace to mark your first month as wife. A tiny portrait painted on ivory, so detailed she barely recognizes her own anxious face. A hand-woven scarf from a distant queen, who writes in her note, "May you find happiness even in small moments." The sentiment nearly breaks her composure. Later, during the dancing, she sits quietly, swinging her legs under the table, as older girls whirl in circles, their laughter ringing out. Her husband is asked to join a game of cards by the older boys. He stumbles through the rules, blushing furiously, before sneaking back to her side. "I wish we could just play," he whispers, eyes bright with the mischief of every little boy ever forced to act like a man. She grins, squeezing his hand under the table, but the grown-ups do not notice. They are too busy toasting, too busy congratulating themselves on the peace this marriage has brought. You sense that peace is not so easily won. It is always fragile, always balanced on the smallest shoulders. As night falls and the hall empties, the feast's leftovers are cleared, and the music fades to memory. The child bride is led from the room, heavy-lidded and aching from the effort of perfection. The corridors echo with the remnants of laughter, but in her own heart, she feels the absence of joy. She finds her chamber, still cluttered with gifts, still strange and unfamiliar, and finally, at last, lets herself cry. Her nurse finds her sitting on the bed, tears tracing lines down her cheeks. The woman kneels beside her, holding out a linen handkerchief embroidered with bluebells. "There now. You did more than well today. You were brave." The child wipes her face, nodding. "I don't want to eat with everyone anymore," she whispers. "It's too much." The nurse smooths her hair, brushing a stray curl from her brow. "I know, but every queen must find a way to keep something for herself, some little piece of happiness, tucked away where no one else can touch it." She leans close, lowering her voice as if sharing a precious secret. What will yours be? The child thinks for a long moment. I think it's the lamb, and the stories, and the music. When I can pretend it's birds flying away, the nurse smiles, planting a gentle kiss on her forehead. That's just right. Later the little bride lies awake. The sounds of celebration faded, the castle hushed, her stomach still aches, not from hunger, but from the effort of being seen but not truly known. She listens for the soft hoot of an owl outside her window, lets the darkness cradle her like a lullaby. In her mind, the tables are cleared, the gifts are gone, and she is simply herself swinging her legs, dreaming of wild gardens and games no one else can see. In these quiet moments, you sense a shift. The rituals of the palace will never become easy, but she is learning where to find small joys. A stolen smile from her husband, a friendly wink from a maid, the secret comfort of her lamb beneath the covers. These become the feasts that nourish her, the gifts that cannot be displayed in public, but which sustain her when the world grows too large. Outside, the moon rises above the towers, pale and patient. The castle sighs in its sleep, and you, watching over her, feel the shape of hope in the dark. If there is any time the palace feels almost like it did before, it is during those odd, sunlit gaps between lessons, when children, newly scrubbed and still shiny with caution, are allowed a semblance of freedom. These are the rare, precious hours when the young bride becomes less a pawn and more a child again, at least in appearance. But even these moments, you'll find, are shadowed by the complexities of court life. Friendships tangled with alliances, play complicated by politics, and trust always measured, never freely given. It begins, as so many things now do, with careful orchestration. The play sessions are scheduled, the participants chosen for their rank and temperament, and a watchful eye is always nearby. No giggles or games escape the notice of a sharp-eyed maid or a hovering governess. Yet for a little while, the children gather in the garden under the pretense of fresh air and exercise, sleeves rolled and ribbons undone, laughter ringing out like wind chimes in a breeze. The child bride looks around at her companions, the cousin she played with in the locked room, the son of a baron awkward, always nervous, a page who is quick with jokes but never too bold, and the daughter of a foreign countess who watches everything with sly, clever eyes. Together they play at being queens and knights, building imaginary fortresses from loose stones, weaving crowns from daisy chains, and organizing races across the dewy grass. To any outsider, it is a scene of innocent fun, but you notice the undercurrents. The children, no matter how small, have learned to guard their secrets. The cousin, for example, always chooses to play the wise counselor, whispering advice into the bride's ear, sometimes slipping in news overheard from the servants. The baron's son tries to win approval with gifts, a frog caught in the lily pond, a feather, a polished pebble, but is quick to sulk if his tokens are ignored. The countess's daughter is an expert in subtlety, deftly turning any game to her advantage and never forgetting a slight. The page, he smiles often, but holds his tongue when grown-ups pass by, having learned that too much honesty can bring trouble. In this small, swirling society, alliances form and dissolve quickly. One morning, the bride is best friends with the countess's daughter. By afternoon, a careless word or forgotten promise has sparked a rivalry. You watch as the children trade barbs, their voices low and careful. "You always get to be queen," says the baron's son, kicking at a stone. The bride answers shyly, "I don't want to be today. I want to be the jester." The children laugh, but the countess's daughter raises an eyebrow, already considering what that reversal might mean for tomorrow's pecking order. It's a gentle microcosm of the adult court, played out in miniature, and you marvel and mourn a little at how quickly they've absorbed its lessons. Trust is offered sparingly, and every confidence shared is a calculated risk. Still, you see moments of genuine warmth, a hand squeezed in comfort, a shared smile over a silly joke, a secret game invented and played only when the grown-ups' backs are turned. You notice too how the staff encourages or discourages certain friendships. The governess beams when the bride sits with the countess's daughter after all. Strengthening ties with her powerful family is a priority, but she frowns at the page, whose parentage is less prestigious. The bride, for her part, is quick to sense these unspoken rules, even if she doesn't fully understand their implications. Even the games reflect the shifting tides of alliance and rivalry. Today, the group builds a fortress from chairs and blankets, assigning each child a role. The bride, tired of being queen, insists on guarding the gate with a wooden spoon, while the countess's daughter claims the throne and issues commands in a mock-serious tone. The page plots a daring rescue, which the baron's son nearly ruins by bursting through the walls too soon. Laughter erupts, and for a moment all is forgotten in the joy of play. Yet, no day in the garden passes without some small drama. Someone is left out, someone sulks, someone is caught tattling to a nurse, and faces a subtle, swift ostracism. The politics of the playground can be just as ruthless as those of the throne room. Still, these hours are vital. You see the bride's eyes grow brighter and the laughter is real. Her shoulders loosen as she runs or spins, the childish flush of joy rising in her cheeks. For a little while, she is just another girl in a world that wants her to be so much more. When the weather turns, the children are herded indoors, where their games become more subdued. Cards, chess, embroidery. Here, the stakes shift yet again. The countess's daughter always wins at cards, but only because the others let her. The bride excels at chess, surprising the grown-ups, though she rarely celebrates her victories too openly. The baron's son tells silly stories, lightening the mood. The page, careful as always, listens more than he speaks. But even as they play, the lessons never stop. A careless comment by the cousin about a visiting ambassador is swiftly shushed by the nurse, reminding them all that ears are everywhere. The countess's daughter tries out a new compliment, learned from her mother. "You look very regal today." The bride, catching the insincerity, manages a polite, careful reply. At the end of each session, the group is dismissed, always by rank, always in order. The bride is first, of course. The others follow, eyes lingering, words unsaid. Some days you watch her linger in the empty room, hugging her lamb close, wishing the play could last just a little longer. Still, these friendships, awkward, complicated, and sometimes fleeting, form the hidden thread of her days. They are practice for the alliances she'll someday forge as a queen, but more importantly, they are her refuge. Here, among the daisies and chessboards, the secrets and laughter, she learns to trust carefully, to forgive easily, and to find joy where she can. And you, quiet observer, see in these small victories the beginning of something extraordinary. Not the cold strength of a ruler, but the warm resilience of a child who, against all odds, is learning how to belong. As dusk settles over the palace and the garden shadows lengthen, the bride returns to her chamber, carrying a flower pressed between the pages of a storybook. She tucks her lamb under her arm, closes her eyes, and whispers a hope for another day of laughter. For a moment you see her as she truly is, not just a bride or a queen, but a little girl, braver than anyone will ever know. The stone halls of the castle feel quieter as the days slip by, and the child bride grows a little taller, her features lengthening with the slow certainty of time. The lessons continue. Music, letters, lineage, grace, but now a new kind of instruction begins to thread its way through her days. These are not the formal teachings of tutors or the whispered reminders of governesses. They are the secret, precious lessons handed down from the older women, her mother, her grandmother, the aunts and gentle cousins, each of whom once wore their own crown of gold, and sometimes sorrow. You sense the difference at once. When her mother visits, it's rarely with an entourage of servants now. Instead, the queen slips into her daughter's room just before dusk, when the sunlight gilds the windows and the castle seems softer, almost gentle. She sits beside her, unbraiding the girl's hair with slow fingers, and begins to talk, not as a queen to a princess, but as one woman to another. "At your age, I was frightened too," her mother confides, voice low and steady. "Everything felt too large, too sharp. I made mistakes. Sometimes I was lonely, even in a room full of people." The bride listens, caught between relief and surprise. She's used to hearing about bravery and duty, but not about fear or loneliness. It's the first time she realizes her mother's childhood was not so different from her own. Grandmother arrives with stories as well, some grand, some sad, and some mischievous enough to draw a real giggle from the girl. "Don't ever let them take away your cleverness," grandmother warns. When I was young, I once hid a frog in the bishop's hat. No one ever guessed it was me. She winks, and for the first time in days, the little bride feels a spark of joy that is not weighed down by expectation. The older women gather her into their circle, weaving her into a tapestry of shared wisdom and experience. They show her how to stitch a hem strong enough to last through 1,000 royal dinners, how to smile with her eyes when her lips are tired, how to keep her voice gentle but never weak. There is even a lesson in how to listen. Listen twice, speak once, her mother says. That is the secret to surviving the court. Some afternoons, the women gather in the garden, sitting under the pear trees, their fingers busy with embroidery or mending. Here the talk is looser, more relaxed. The bride, always the youngest, listens and learns. She sees that these women are not perfect, but resilient. Each has faced her own heartbreak, her own test of courage. An aunt describes a winter so cold that the ink froze in her inkwell. A cousin tells of the year she was sent away to a foreign land, her only friend a sparrow who visited her window each morning. Through these stories, the child bride begins to understand that her struggles are not unique, nor are they insurmountable. She is not alone. Each woman in her life has survived, and so will she. This, you realize, is the quiet inheritance of queens, not crowns or jewels, but endurance, cleverness, and the slow, steady building of a self that will not break. There are practical lessons too, how to sense when a maid is truly loyal, and when she is merely listening for gossip, how to thank a servant by name, how to hide a letter in a hem or a secret in a lullaby. Her grandmother teaches her the old songs of the countryside, filled with riddles and warnings, echoes of a world where queens and milkmaids once danced to the same tune, and not all the guidance is gentle. Sometimes, when the court is tense, the talk turns serious. Her mother explains the art of apology, how to admit a mistake without losing dignity, how to offer forgiveness with real grace. There will always be those who hope to see you fail, the Queen says. Never let them see you afraid. These are lessons for a lifetime, given softly but meant to last forever. Yet, it's not all survival and politics. There are silly moments too. Once the women smuggle sweet pastries from the kitchen and eat them with their fingers, giggling like girls themselves. Another evening, they light candles and tell ghost stories, their voices lowering for effect, until the youngest cousin shrieks and dives under a blanket. Even her mother joins in, her laughter ringing through the chamber, light and bright. Through it all, the bride learns that being a queen is not about never being afraid, but about choosing to stand, again and again in spite of fear. She feels the quiet pride of her foremothers settling into her bones. She will make her own mistake. She will have days when the weight of the crown feels unbearable. But she will also have these lessons, these stories, this circle of women around her, echoing through memory and heart. On a particularly hard day, after a lesson gone wrong and a curt word from a tutor, the bride curls up in the window seat. Her mother sits beside her, drawing her close. "You will have days when you feel like you can't go on," she says softly. "But you can, you must. Not because you are a queen, but because you are you, and you are stronger than you know." As dusk deepens and the castle quiets, you see the little bride hold her head a touch higher, her eyes brighter. She carries these lessons quietly, like seeds tucked into her pockets, certain that someday they will bloom. You sit with her as night falls, the lullabies of generations humming in her ear. In this soft darkness, surrounded by the warmth of shared stories, she finds a comfort that even the grandest crown could never give. Morning breaks, and for once it is not a parade of lessons that greets the child bride, but a flurry of silk, linen, and lace. In the antechamber just outside her bedroom, seamstresses are already hard at work, their needles glinting as they stitch, hem and finish yet another set of gowns. The room buzzes with energy, the swish of fabric, the snap of thread, the hum of quiet gossip, as dressmakers and maids move about like bees in a hive. Today is a fitting day. The child bride is expected to stand for hours as new gowns are draped, pinned, and adjusted. Her young body the canvas for court fashion and the insecurities of her elders. Her mother enters with a smile that doesn't quite reach her eyes, and smooths her daughter's hair, whispering a quiet encouragement. It's only a little while, then you can rest. You watch as the seamstresses present their work, a rainbow of garments from pale blue silk for dinners, to deep red velvet for church, to a stiff brocade trimmed with seed pearls that's meant for only the grandest occasions. There is even a cloak lined with ermine, the fur as soft as snow. Each garment is a statement, each stitch a tiny claim to power, and the bride is both honoured and imprisoned by their weight. She tries to be patient, but it's difficult. The fabrics are cold when first draped across her shoulders. The pins sometimes bite, and the layers pile up until she feels more statue than girl. "Stand tall," says the senior seamstress, her voice brisk but not unkind. "We must show the world your strength." The child tries, but she cannot help fidgeting. The gowns are stiff, the corset's laces pull at her ribs, and the shoes, oh the shoes, pinch her toes into unnatural shapes. The older girls in attendance, including her cousin and the countess's daughter, watch curiously. Some are jealous, some sympathetic. One whispers, "At least you get the prettiest silks." The bride offers a shy smile, unsure whether to feel proud or burdened. The mirrors tell a complicated story. When she looks at her reflection, she sees a queen in miniature, jeweled, draped, and elegant. But when she blinks, she also sees the nervous girl beneath the bitten lip, the quick, darting eyes, the little bruises on her shins, where she tripped in the garden last week. The contrast is dizzying. "You look so grown up," a maid whispers, but you sense she'd trade all the silk for a single day in plain cotton barefoot in the grass. As the seamstresses work, the adults fuss over details. Her sleeves must be longer, to show modesty. No, shorter, her arms are too thin. This collar is too severe. Try lace. The child stands still, a puppet for their ambitions, her patience slowly fraying. A younger maid catches her eye and, with a wink, tucks a candy into her palm during a particularly tedious adjustment. The bride pops it into her mouth, savouring its sweetness as a secret victory. Each gown comes with a story, one for welcoming ambassadors, another for feast days, another still for quiet evenings by the fire. Her mother explains the purpose behind every detail, why the family crest is embroidered at her breast, why the colour blue signifies loyalty, why certain fabrics can only be worn before sunset. "Clothes are a language, my love," her mother says, arranging a sapphire pendant at her throat. "People will read you before they hear you speak." After hours of standing, spinning and trying not to yawn, the fittings are finally declared finished. The seamstresses depart, and the maids begin to tidy up, folding the gowns into cedar chests. The child bride sags with relief, only to be whisked away for a new ritual, the public reveal. She is presented to the court in her most splendid new dress, paraded through the great hall while ladies and gentlemen murmur their approval. As she walks, she feels every gaze. Some are admiring, some envious, a few pitying. It is a test as much as a celebration. She remembers her mother's advice. Chin up, smile gently, hands at your side, and does her best to glide, not shuffle despite her aching feet. When the ceremony is done and the court disperses, she flees to her room, tears pricking her eyes. "Why must I dress up every day?" she whispers to a lamb, squeezing it tightly. "Why can't I wear my old smock, just once?" There is no answer, except the quiet creak of the wardrobe as the maids hang up her new finery. But not all is lost to ceremony. That evening, as a gentle rain patters against the window, her mother finds her curled up on a window seat. They watch the droplets race each other down the glass, the child bride tracing patterns with her finger. Her mother pulls her close, tucking a blanket around her shoulders. "One day you'll choose your own gowns," she says softly. "One day all these silks will be yours to command. For now, let them be your armour." Before bed, her grandmother visits, bearing a bundle wrapped in linen. "A present for my favourite girl," she winks, and produces a plain cotton shift, soft and well worn. "Just for you, for when you wish to remember the old days." The child's eyes widen in delight. She slips it on, basking in the comfort of simplicity, and for the first time in weeks she sleeps deeply, the cotton cool against her skin, dreams untroubled by pearls and lace. In the morning, The palace will expect its perfect little queen again. But tonight, in the hush between storm and sunrise, she is herself, real, unadorned and loved, wrapped in softness and a grandmother's quiet understanding. You linger by her bedside as she dreams, content that, even in a world obsessed with appearances, she is learning to see the beauty beneath the silk. In the end, it is not the gowns that make her royal, but the courage to keep her heart open, no matter how heavy the crown or how bright the jewels. Even in a world of whispered rules and golden cages, the castle's walls cannot muffle every story, nor silence every forbidden dream. As you follow the child bride into her 14th season of lessons and expectations, you begin to notice the quiet ways rebellion finds a voice, softly, almost secretly, in the after-hours hush, when the corridors are empty and the moon casts blue light across cold stone. It is at bedtime especially that the real stories come out, not the grand tales recited at feasts, but the low, forbidden murmurs that slip from the lips of servants and maids as they tuck the child beneath heavy blankets. Her favourite is an old nurse named Nan, whose hair is streaked with silver and whose voice creaks with laughter. Nan is an artist of secrets, a conjurer of comfort. She has a way of folding bed sheets and worries with equal care. Once, there was a princess who never did as she was told. Nan begins, her hands busy smoothing a quilt. They tried to make her walk with a book on her head, but she hid it in the pantry and put a cabbage there instead. And when the queen found it, she laughed so hard she nearly dropped her crown. The child bride giggles, the sound muffled in her pillow. Did she get in trouble? She whispers. Only a little, Nan winks, but she slept well that night, knowing she'd made her own story. It's a dangerous thing, this kind of story, an unspoken reminder that there is life beyond obedience, that mischief can be a kind of power. Nan's tales are always layered on the surface, simple fun, but underneath, a quiet encouragement to keep a spark of selfhood alive. Not all rules are made to be followed, Nan will say in a conspiratorial tone, just the ones you choose. The child bride listens, wide-eyed, drinking in every detail. These stories become her secret armor, layering her dreams with images of daring escapes, clever tricks, and girls who outwit fate. On restless nights when the world feels too large and the silence too thick, she replays them in her mind, a comfort against the weight of her crown. Sometimes it isn't only Nan who brings rebellion to bedtime. Other maids, in snatches and whispers, offer tales of queens who rode horses astride and kings who learned to cook, of peasants who rose to greatness, and young girls who swapped places with their brothers to see the world. These tales don't appear in official histories, nor are they embroidered on courtly banners, but in the hush of a child's bedroom, they are as real and powerful as any edict. You notice the change these stories work within her. She grows bolder, in small, careful ways. During lessons, she asks questions, not just the ones with safe answers, but those that make her tutors pause. Why must queens always smile? She wonders aloud. Why can't I run in the garden after supper? The adults blink, caught off guard. Some scold gently, others evade, but a few, her mother especially, smile with secret pride. Her rebellion is rarely dramatic. It is the rebellion of almost a maybe, of finding the edges of what is allowed, and then pressing, ever so softly, against them. She learns to walk barefoot in the mornings before anyone else wakes, to tuck a ribbon from her old smock beneath the jeweled collar of her dress, to sneak pastries to page boy who never gets enough to eat. With Nan's encouragement, she even learns to tell stories of her own. One afternoon, after a particularly dull lesson in court etiquette, she invents a tale about a frog who wants to be a bird. The frog tries everything, jumping higher, flapping his legs, singing at the top of his lungs. In the end, he doesn't grow wings, but he does make friends with the birds, who teach him how to see the sky. She tells it to her friends, and soon the page boy is acting out the frog, the cousin flapping her arms like wings. For a moment the world feels lighter, the rules less sharp. Word of her gentle mischief drifts through the castle, sometimes reaching the ears of those who rule. One day her grandmother finds her hiding beneath the stair, with a handful of pilfered gooseberries. The old woman only laughs, shaking her head. "Just don't let them catch you every time," she advises, winking. Still, not all stories are sweet. Sometimes the maids whisper warnings of queens whose spirits were broken, of girls who lost themselves in the machinery of marriage and duty. These stories are soft, sad, and never finished, left hanging in the air as a kind of unspoken plea. Be careful, little one, remember who you are. But even the warnings are gifts. They teach her that life is made of choices, and that she can be brave and careful, hopeful and wise. She begins to notice the quiet ways others rebel. A cook who sings forbidden songs in the kitchen, a scribe who writes letters in the margins of royal books, a nurse who sneaks an extra blanket to a homesick page. She understands, in a way only children do, that the world is made up of stories, and that the truest ones are often those told in secret, in the quiet between dusk and dream. One evening when the moon is bright and the castle is especially quiet, the child bride sits at her window, knees drawn up to her chest. She gazes out over the gardens, the shadows long and silver on the grass. She remembers Nan's stories, her mother's secret smiles, her own small victories. "I will not forget," she whispers into the night, "who I am and what I wish to be." She falls asleep to the lull of wind and distant bells, her heart full of wild, gentle dreams, of cabbages hidden in pantries, of frogs learning to see the sky, of girls who dare to write their own histories. And you, keeping watch, sense that the slow, quiet rebellion of stories has become something greater, the beginnings of courage, rooted deep and steady, ready for the day when she will need it most. Years pass, and with each turn of the season, you watch the child bride's world change, sometimes slowly, like water shaping stone, and sometimes all at once, as when a thunderstorm sweeps the sky clean. She is no longer quite a child, though the echo of her earliest years lingers in the way she traces patterns on frosted glass or laughs, unexpectedly, at a silly rhyme. The palace still remembers her as the little bride in the too heavy gown, but now, as adolescence stirs, she stands at the crossroads of childhood and authority. Survival in this strange golden cage is never a simple thing. You see it first in the subtle shifts, the way she carries herself in the corridors, the poise in her voice when courtiers bow, the gentle but undeniable firmness with which she corrects the younger maids when they forget their bows. Her lessons, never ending, always layered with expectation, begin to yield fruit. She can recite the history of her husband's house, list her own ancestors back to Charlemagne, and speak 3 languages with the unself-conscious lilt of youth. But there is something deeper too, a wariness, a watchful intelligence that was not there before. The castle's walls, so confining once, have become her proving ground. She knows where the shadows fall in each room, which steps creak on the staircase, how to slip away when the court's eyes are elsewhere. The locked playroom, the endless lessons, the long, cold feasts, all have shaped her, but none have broken her. You marvel at this. She has learned to move as quietly as the moon at midnight, but when she chooses to speak, her voice cuts through the air like sunlight. The girl who once felt lost in silk and pearls now wears her gowns with pride, transforming them from chains into armor. She selects her own colors, soft grays for mornings, deep blues for councils, the crimson cloak of her house for high feasts. Her fingers are nimble with needle and quill. She writes letters for her mother, composes verses for her grandmother, and even drafts careful notes to her husband, whose company she has begun to share, not just in duty but in understanding. For the marriage, too, has changed. The boy who was once as lost and silent as she now sits beside her at meals, sometimes awkward but increasingly thoughtful. They share small jokes, inside secrets about the fussy bishop, or the page boy who can never keep his shoes clean. In the privacy of their shared rooms, they talk quietly, exchanging hopes and sometimes doubts. "Do you think," he asks one night, "that we will ever truly rule?" She considers, then answers, "If we learn to be brave when it matters, if we remember who we are beneath all this." He nods, grateful for her honesty. Their partnership is not one of fairy tales, but of survival and slow trust. He listens when she speaks, defends her when she is challenged, and she, in turn, encourages his confidence and steadies his nerves. At court, They present a united front, young but not to be underestimated. There are older nobles who grumble about their age, who scheme and whisper, but you see the pair learning, adapting, growing stronger with every test. In the gardens where she once chased butterflies with her nurse, the young bride now walks with her head high. She pauses to speak with the gardeners, remembering their names and the names of their children. She grants small favours, a new spindle for the old maid, a day off for the page with the sick mother. These are the quiet politics of kindness, and you see how they ripple outward, changing the air in the castle, making her allies in unexpected places. Still, danger never sleeps. There are plots she must untangle, rumours to stamp out, moments when the lessons of her mothers and grandmothers come rushing back. Listen twice, speak once. Hide your cleverness, but use it well. Her enemies are often unseen, their weapons subtle, an overheard comment, a missing letter, an alliance quietly shifting hands. She learns to spot the warning signs, the sidelong glance between two lords, the hush that falls when she enters the room. When her own loyalty is questioned, she stands her ground, never shrill, never afraid, just steady, anchored by all the stories and wisdom she's gathered since childhood. There are nights when doubt creeps in, when she wonders if her path was chosen, or if she has, in small ways, chosen it herself. Those are the nights when she sits by the window, wrapped in her grandmother's old shift, and lets herself be young again. She writes a line of poetry, sketches a wildflower, or simply listens to the wind rattle the shutters. Tomorrow, she whispers, I will try again. The seasons turn. In spring, she attends the planting of the gardens, blessing the seeds with a handful of rainwater. In summer, she leads the court through processions and festivals, learning which smiles are genuine and which are knives. In autumn, she oversees the storing of the harvest, meeting with the steward, making decisions that affect lives far beyond her own. Winter brings its own challenges, illness, cold, and the endless darkness of short days. But she lights candles in every window, insisting on warmth, on hope. Her greatest tests come not from pageantry, but from sorrow. There are losses, a beloved aunt who slips away in the night, a page who falls ill, a favourite dog who does not wake one morning. The grief is sharp, but she does not hide from it. Instead, she lets it shape her, make her kinder, wiser. She sits with her mother in silence, learning that sometimes comfort is simply presence, not words. With each passing year, you see the traces of the little girl she once was. A quick laugh, a secret smile, a fondness for sweet cakes, woven into the fabric of a young woman who is, slowly but surely, becoming more than just a symbol. She is a queen in the making, compassionate but not naive, strong but not cruel, clever but never unkind. Her legacy is being written, page by careful page. In every act of kindness, every firm word, every moment of courage, she is building something that will last far beyond the confines of the castle. And you, patient companion, know this is how history is truly shaped, not by the loud proclamations of kings, but by the quiet endurance and gentle rebellions of those who were once seen as pawns. And on those nights when the world feels heavy, she remembers the lessons whispered to her in darkness, the stories that taught her the difference between obedience and courage. She gathers her friends close, those who have grown with her, those who once played at queenship under the arbour. Together they plot gardens, write verses, and share secrets over stolen pastries. The future is uncertain, but it is hers. You stay with her as another dawn brightens the horizon. She sits at her window, the lamb tucked beside her, heart steady and eyes bright. Whatever comes, she murmurs, I am ready. History's heavy door is always creaking, never quite closed. Now, as you linger in the final corridors of the child bride's story, the air feels thick with the hush before a new era. The years have spun onward, each one both a loss and a quiet victory, and the castle's stones have absorbed every sigh, every laugh, every echo of a child who once walked its halls in slippers too big for her feet. Tonight you move with her through the long, dim corridors, the tapestries fluttering in a faint night breeze. Her figure, once so tiny, nearly lost in the grandeur, now glides with calm purpose, silk gowns whispering softly over the old stones. The castle staff bow with familiar respect. Even the eldest guards, grizzled and sharp-eyed, greet her with a nod that means more than duty. It means trust, and a memory of the girl she was and the woman she has become. There is no grand celebration, no blaring trumpets for the victories she's won. Most of her triumphs are the quiet kind, the sort that slip beneath the surface of the official records. Yet the air in the palace is different now, lighter in some ways. She has left her mark not through force or decree, but through small changes that ripple outward. Fairer rules for the servants, music in the halls on feast days, laughter echoing from chambers once kept silent. You see her pause at a window, gazing out at the moonlit gardens where she once played beneath watchful eyes. The roses she planted with the gardeners, her hands small and clumsy then, deft and gentle now, have flourished. Their fragrance drifts up to her even now, mingling with memory. For a moment, she rests her hand on the sill, letting her breath miss the glass, and you realize she's tracing not just her own path, but the hopes of all those before her. Down the hall, a quiet council gathers. She enters with quiet confidence, the rustle of her gown announcing her before her words do. The courtiers rise, awaiting her signal. Her husband, older, still a little shy, but steady, meets her eyes across the room, and together they settle the business of the day. A new law to ease the burdens of village mothers, a small festival for the children of the town, a clever solution for a neighbour's stubborn border dispute. The work is endless, but it is work she chooses. Each decision is weighed against lessons learned long ago. The importance of kindness, the power of listening, the quiet strength in saying no when necessary. She does not win every battle, nor does she try to. Sometimes you see her close her eyes in the council chamber and recall a grandmother's story or a nurse's warning. Sometimes she even laughs, a real bright laugh that startles those around her, as if to say, yes, I remember what it is to be young and afraid, and I am still both. Some days, in the quieter hours, she wanders the castle alone. She visits the old playroom, now unlocked, its treasures mostly forgotten. She finds the lamb frayed, patched, but cherished, sits beside it, and lets her fingers rest on the faded seams. If anyone were to peek in, they'd see not a queen, but a woman in the half-light, tracing the lines her own story. She keeps the circle of women close. Her mother, silver-haired now but wise as ever. Her grandmother, sometimes slow but always sharp. Her friends, grown and scattered but summoned for festivals and council. Together, they remind each other that history is not just what is written, but what is remembered and retold. Some nights, the queen sneaks pastries to the kitchen boys, or sits with the maids by the fire to listen to new tales, her laughter low, her presence a comfort. In the town beyond the castle walls, people speak of her with fondness, even pride. She is the kind queen, they say, the one who remembers our names, who walks among us on festival days, who visits the sick, who makes sure no child is ever truly alone. Her legacy, you realize, is written not in chronicles, but in 100 small acts of mercy and understanding. Sometimes, late at night, she sits by the window, listening to the hush of the world outside. She remembers the locked doors, the heavy silks, the endless days of lessons, and the stories whispered by the fire. She knows she could have been broken by it all, but she was not. She gathers her memories as gently as her grandmother once gathered wildflowers, tying them into a bouquet of comfort and strength. And so, as you follow her through the palace one last time, you feel history's door closing softly. The story of the youngest bride, once a tale of loss and quiet sorrow, becomes a testament to survival, to the strange alchemy of endurance and gentle rebellion, to the hope that even in the most gilded cages, something wild and bright can endure. You pause with her at the edge of sleep, moonlight painting the wall in gentle silver. Her eyes close, her breath deepens, and the hush of the castle seems to wrap around her like a lullaby. The burdens of duty, the echoes of childhood, tonight they all drift away on the night breeze, and you, the silent witness to it all, smile softly, knowing that stories like hers are never truly over. They live on, whispered in the hush of midnight, carried forward by those who need them most. The story slows now, the world outside quieting to a low, comforting hum. You imagine the castle's halls bathed in dusk, all sharp edges softened by gentle shadow. The air feels cool and safe, the sort that makes you want to nestle deeper beneath your blanket. Even the worries of the day seem lighter now, drifting farther with each slow, even breath. You picture her no longer a child, but a gentle queen, walking among roses in the moonlight. Each step is deliberate, unhurried, her burdens laid down for the night. She sits at her window, watching stars appear, the hush of the gardens below a promise that tomorrow will be gentler. With every breath she lets the past settle softly in her memory, heavy lessons, tender stories, and the courage it took to endure. The old lamb sits at her side, a quiet reminder that even the smallest comforts can last a lifetime. She closes her eyes, the weight of crowns and expectation giving way to the sweet release of sleep. And you, following the gentle thread of her dreams, feel yourself relax, shoulders softening, jaw unclenching, heart slowing. Let the story's final notes settle around you like falling petals. You are safe. You are seen. Somewhere out there, others are listening too, tucked into their own beds, hearts a little lighter for the journey you've shared. Rest now, beneath the hush of ancient stones and timeless stars. Let your breathing grow slow and easy, your thoughts soft and peaceful. The night is long, but you are not alone. Sweet dreams, and may the memory of courage and kindness keep you company until the morning.